Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the Ronald Coase Institute for inviting me to be here. I'm actually one of the alumni of the Coase Institute workshop in 2008 when I was just a third-year grad student, and since then I've get a lot of support from the Coase Institute, especially Mary Shirley and Lee and Alexandra Benham. So I really want to thank the Coase Institute. And I'm also very glad to be here and share my research with you all today. My topic today is the land for welfare in China. My research has been focused on China and has been motivated by my empirical observation while I was in China doing field work. So the research I want to focus today is why do local government provide the rural residents with social welfare benefits? This question is puzzling to me because one thing is China is still authoritarian regime, so local officials do not face the election pressure. Instead, their career prospects in China are determined by the cadre evaluation system. Basically, officials are evaluated every year based on a number of yardsticks. From the field work in 2009, what we see here is if we look at all the evaluation, about 50% of the evaluation score are concentrated on promoting economic growth. And since China has this huge pollution problem, so 30% of the score focus on the environment improvement. And then we have 10% focus on social security and 10% on focus on social safety net. Within this 10% of social security, actually, that is primarily for the urban residents. In other words, the people who have higher score will have better chance to be promoted politically. But then think about the provision of social welfare benefits to rural residents. That is not actually a mandate for local government officials. And why do they want to provide welfare benefits when they are not politically promoted? So that's puzzling. And in addition, in China, local officials face this budget constraint. What happened is, in this figure tells us, now the red line represents the ratio of the local government revenue to the total government revenue, and then the dotted line represents the local government expenditure to the total government expenditure. What happened in China was in 1994, the central government implemented a new tax sharing system which allowed the center to extract a huge amount of money from the local government. So what we see here is after 1994, the local government faced a huge budget deficit. In other words, local government are physically squeezed by the central government, which constrain them from providing social welfare benefits. So now it's really puzzling. Why do local government provide social welfare benefits when they are not politically motivated and also physically squeezed? And more importantly, when I see the data, this is the data from 2008 China survey, and the y-axis tells us the percentage of rural residents receiving pension insurance. What we see here is there's a large variation across subnational units in China. So the next question we want to ask is, what explains this variation in social welfare benefits in rural China? My answer, very simple, is land for welfare. It's the local government provides social welfare benefits in exchange for land. Of course, for the rest of my talk, I will give you a more complex explanation. Now, first of all, in order to explain the logic, we want to see the institutional constraint that peasants and local government are facing here. In China, there is a profound urban and rural divide. First one we can see here is the dual land tenure system. What happened in China is there is individual do not own land. Instead, all land is publicly owned. Specifically, urban land is owned by the state, rural land is owned by rural collectives. And individual only have land use rights, which is separate from land ownership rights. But a big institutional constraint is in order to lease your land, and rural households do not have the rights to lease land land directly to the urban land users. Instead, this land has to be first expropriated by the local government, and then local government leased out land use rights to urban land developers. So in other words, the local government become the monopoly in urban land market. So that allows the local government to get a lot of revenue. Now the slides here shows you in China, land has become a very important source of revenue. And here we have 4 bars here. It represents the 4 land generated revenue. We have arable land occupation tax, land value-added tax, and land use tax, and deed tax. This is from the 2004 data. So from 2004, we see if we combine these 4 together, it takes about 7% of local government revenue. But now let's look at how they grow from 2004 to 2013. So what happens in 2013 is within 7 years, and then the percentage already increased from 7% to more than 15%. And this is just the land directly generated revenue. Of course, and there's a real estate industry that also generates a lot of revenue, which is not here. And in addition, land also generated a big component of revenue, which is a land transfer fee, which is a lump sum payment when land is transferred to urban land users and who then pay this to the government. Now the red bar here represents the land transfer fee, and then the blue bar represents the total local government revenue. From here we can see from 2004 to 2013, even though there is some variation, but land transfer fee account about like 60% of local government revenue. So what we see here is definitely land has become a very important source of government revenue. But even that, despite this huge amount of money, and that is still not sufficient to support local government to develop the local economy. So what happened in China is land not only serves as a source of revenue, but also a source to finance the whole local economic development. So this is what happens in China. Because of the dual land tenure system, and local government first expropriate rural land and retitle it as urban land. Because urban land is owned by the state, so now local government can use land as collateral to apply for bank loans. Once the government gets money, and then government can use this money to finance the local infrastructure and also make the electricity, water, and transportation available to that piece of land to increase the land price. Once land prices increase, the local government can actually lease out the land use rights, and then once the land is leased out, and the government can collect all the revenue and repay the bank loans and keep the rest of the money for themselves. So what we see here is the government desperately need land. But then another aspect about urban-rural divide is the dual-track welfare system. This is inherited from the Mao area. It has an urban bias. So what happened in China is urban residents has a variety of social welfare benefits, whereas rural residents have almost zero. So this is what we call rural residents in China is kind of like second-class citizen because they don't have all sorts of social welfare benefits. So under this constraint, what we see here is land to the rural residents. On the one hand, the land function as a source of income, but on the other hand, it also functions as a social insurance. Now, given this huge urban-rural divide, what does the central government want to do? The central government obviously want to mitigate the urban-rural divide. The way they do it is they call for the unified management of urban and rural areas. So that the picture gives you what this whole system works. So in order to unified manage the urban-rural area, that actually alternatively is actually another way for the local government to gain more land. This is how the system works. Now, we see we have a lot, all the houses, like the flat houses, that's like the rural area. So they can tear down all the rural houses because the rural house is so spread out, and then they can put all the peasants from the previously spread out houses to the tall building, and then all those houses, all those land occupied previously by the rural houses now become available for the local government. So that's even when the central government, even though the central government incentive is to mitigate the urban-rural divide, but that in reality actually allow the local government to get additional land. And on the other hand, the central government encourage local government to just encourage but not require the local government to use part of the land-generated revenue to finance the local rural social welfare provision. Now, given the central government's program, let's think about what local government can do in response to the central government. Now, as we mentioned, local government definitely want to get more land as much as possible. Now, what they can do when they get land? Now, let's think about the possible way for the. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot this slide. This is, sorry about that. For the central government, what happened in China is for any type of policy or program, what typically happen in China is if they want to implement something, they always, they typically use the experimental approach, basically allow a few places to implement the program first, and then when the central government see a desirable outcome, and then they expand the local experiments to the nation world, to the whole to large scale. Now, given that, let's think about the locals' response. Now, from a local government perspective, when they take land, there are several possible options for them to provide the land taking compensation. One is there's no compensation. The other one is they just provide the minimum compensation prescribed by the state regulation, or they can provide the minimum cash compensation prescribed by the regulation. In addition, they provide social welfare benefits. This is correspond to what we just mentioned, because to the rural residents, land functions as a source of income and a social insurance. And in addition, they can provide more cash, in addition to the minimum cash, and they provide more cash. Now, think about all the options. One is no compensation, because no compensation clearly violates the state regulation, so that's not an option. The other one is minimum compensation. We're talking about the local experimental places, right? We're talking about those places are possibly become a model, which probably will have the chance to expand the whole country. So just do the minimum compensation, it's the same as elsewhere, so that's not possible. Now think about the two options is minimum compensation plus social welfare benefits and just more cash. Now here's the answer I got is from my field work. When we talk to government officials, their answer is, well, provide social welfare benefits, allow the local government to pay the money on a yearly basis, whereas more cash is you have to provide all the money at one time. And so basically, the social welfare benefits allow the local government to defer the payment and also to actually distribute the cost to the successors. The reason is because in China, this is an institutional constraint, and local officials can only stay in the same position for no more than 10 years, actually 2 5-year terms. In reality, local officials can stay in the same position for typically less than 5 years, so they can actually transfer the cost of providing social welfare benefits to his successors. So finally, what we see is the most preferred option for the local officials is provide a minimum cash compensation plus some social welfare benefits. Now, the next question is what type of social welfare benefits? And then from the field work I found is the government officials provide pensions. The reason is because pension is only people get to a certain age are eligible to get pension. Is people, women at the age of 55 and men at the age of 60 are then start giving pension. So what local government do is promise to give you pension, so you have the insurance, and then in terms of pay you the pension is only when you get to the certain age. So that again allow the government to get all the benefits from land taking, but then defer the cost to the successors. Now let's just use a empirical example. I'll just I'll skip this. Let's just quickly move to the statistical task. So again, I use the China survey, which has the 2000. Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, I have to conclude?
Yeah.
You want me to conclude? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, to conclude, just give you the takeaway points. The first one is we want to say the local government provides social welfare benefits in exchange for land. But we also see that the provision is selective. So instead of this universal provision, what we see here is landless farmers are more likely to receive social welfare benefits than the people who do not experience land expropriation. On the other hand, what we see here is even the social welfare benefits are selective. It's really the cheaper ones, like pensions, are more likely to be provided. Some other benefits, for instance, unemployment insurance, are not provided because the unemployment insurance requires the local government to pay the money immediately after their land is taken. Finally, what we see here is the local government provides social welfare benefits is developed out of their benign intention. Instead, is their strategic reaction to the center's program to mitigate the urban-rural divide. Thank you.